The courtyard in front of you is a space we call an arena. Arenas are built to hold the player for a period of time and usually contain combat or some other challenge. They often have multiple entry points for enemies, along with a gate of some kind to prevent the player moving on until the challenge has been completed. In this case, the arena is free of enemies until the player solves a puzzle and triggers an alarm. This is a method that allows the player to explore the arena and get a sense of its space before being fight in it. It adds a sense of uneasiness to the player who's expecting to be attacked now that they've reached the goal set for them at the start of the map. The break in the action here is also a crucial part of the level's pacing. It allows the player to recover and explore the world a little after being attacked on the way up the cliffside.
The source engine supports a wide variety of shaders. The refraction shader on the window here requires us to copy the scene to a texture, refract it, and then apply it to the window surface. To fully support HDR, every shader in the engine needed to be updated. So this refraction shader was improved to support the full range of contrast. If you viewed the sun through this window, it would be refracted correctly.
We wanted to transition from a bright, wide-open space into a tighter, closed one to showcase HDR's dynamic tone mapping. We also like to focus on contrasting elements in our settings, like ancient human architecture and futuristic combat technology. A monastery fit these requirements perfectly. Monasteries are generally isolated, unlit, and built ages ago. They provide a great backdrop for the contrasting combat technology. When we build fictional settings, we try to ground them by basing them off a real-world location. We use this location as a design constraint that forces a logical consistency behind the art choices. Churches are great dramatic spaces. They're often lit naturally with extremes of darkness and brightness, which makes them a great showcase for HDR. Gothic churches are the sober monochromatic spaces that you've seen in almost every horror movie or game. Byzantine churches, on the other hand, they're very colorful and have a large variety of materials. We wanted that color and material variety to show off our HDR reflections.
Our games are filled with things we call gates, which are essentially just challenges that the player must overcome to drive the experience forward. We used a puzzle here since the player has been through combat and exploration recently. When we design challenges, we try to ensure that the player's goal and the action required by the player are both fun. It's not hard to create interesting goals for the player, like stopping this machine from shelling the nearby village, but the action required by the player to solve the challenge needs to be fun as well. So instead of something menial, such as hitting an off switch, the player gets to use physics to jam the gun's mechanism and cause it to break.
Внимание! Крови обнаружено ОВИ.
marks the end of the Lost Coast tour. This has been an experiment on our part to see if our community would find it interesting to learn more about our development process. As always, we're interested in your feedback. I can be reached at gaben, Gaben, at valvesoftware.com. If people like this, we'll keep producing this kind of content for all of our games going forward. Thanks for listening.
Пошли за мной к Святой Ольге. Устроим шикарный праздник в честь победы. Надеюсь, тебе нравится кровопийца. Эй, ты куда пойдешь? Как-то ты расплываешься. Полагаю, тебе есть куда податься. Рад знакомству.